I'm Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now is Toban Dyck, Director of Communications for the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers here at Cropsapalooza. Welcome here, Toban.
Thank you, Lyndsey. It's great to be here.
All right, so let's start with, of course, what Cropsapalooza is all about from your organization's perspective, if you've got a booth here, and what people can see when they get here.
Okay. That sounds great, Lyndsey. I mean, Cropsapalooza is really all about it's all about collaboration. This is an event that used to be Canola Palooza.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Years ago.
So this is about adding and expanding horizons.
Right. And it's about working together. Right?
Yes.
It's about the commodity groups working together, and that's an important part of Cropsapalooza, and that's something we like to celebrate at MPSG for sure. It's a great event. It's great to be here. I like how it's very casual. Farmers can just walk up, have a conversation with you. It's less workshop-based than say, other extension events are, so that's nice.
Yep.
I know our agronomists like that too, that kind of casual nature.
Yeah. It's sort of like this mix between like a field day and a trade show.
Yeah.
Where, right, like people can kind of come and go, but there's a little structure to it in that every booth has sort of a story to tell and a topic to cover and and that sort of stuff. I love it. There's so much to see. I am very much a like the soil pit and the roots and I want to see all that, right? So it's super cool to have demos and those sorts of things, which I think is pretty awesome. So and it is, I think, realistically, a farmer who grows canola grows a whole bunch of other things too. So why not bring it all together? I think it's a great idea.
Totally.
Focus is also important. Nothing wrong with having a, only canola event, but I do like changing it up a little, especially the fact that there's 3 of these across the province. So it's nice to add a little flavor of some other crops in the mix as we go.
So does Saskatchewan have one?
Yes.
And then Alberta too?
Yes.
Okay, so those are the 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, but so it's really neat. And so the RealAgriculture team, we've been to all of them.
Okay.
And so it's really neat because there's certainly, of course, things that are similar or the same between them. But then, each place has their own extension staff there, or specific issues to that region or whatever. So it's a really neat, even from the perspective of from an outsider just interested in all of it, you get to see sort of a better breadth of all the things that we're dealing with and that sort of stuff. So it's really cool. Now, Toban, you also farm.
I do.
Whereabouts?
Just north of Winkler, Manitoba.
All right. So what is your soil like? Because we talked earlier at this event about this being Class 1, beautiful soil. Is that what you deal with at home?
I mean, the devil's always in the details, Lyndsey. It's I don't know. You can ask me one thing, and my dad might say something completely different.
Well, there you go. That's true. Depends which field we're talking
about.
Well,
that's exactly right, and then which part of the field. So our soils run from sandier, definitely sandier, to quite heavy, but in general quite lovely.
Yeah.
soil.
Now there's some good land around Winkler. There's a reason.
There's a reason.
Yeah, that there's a lot of farmers down there that.
And there's a reason the land prices are high.
Right, exactly. we could get into land prices if you really wanted to. Now, I will tell you, I live in Ontario now.
This is true.
And so my bar is slightly skewed.
It is.
And yet, but it's important. Perspective is important, though, because, the costs of, let's say, getting your product to market and all everything is relative, right?
That's right.
And I will say that, yes, there are areas of Ontario where the land price is just astronomical. And maybe on average, yes, the average, cost per acre in Ontario is higher. But everything else sort of slides around too, right? So I'm always fascinated by the differences between, how much things move by train here on the prairies, and in Ontario it all moves by truck and then onto boats. And, and so there's just fundamental differences. And realistically, it doesn't really matter if compared to Ontario, land is cheaper here because you still have to run your business here.
That's right.
And so
it
everything
still has to
else,
pencil out.
it still has to pencil out. And land has gotten very expensive quite quickly here. So, yeah, absolutely. Now, which is always a concern, and it's one of the things we've talked about, at this event and those sorts of things is on the production side is how you tackle some of these challenges to try and be profitable, right? It's not all just about yield. It's about, actually balancing those inputs with what you can get out of it. Now, you're a relatively new farmer, are you not?
Yeah, although I have to be careful, Lyndsey, because even when I'm walking around Winkler and I'll meet somebody from high school, it'll be like, "Oh, you just moved back," and I'll say, Or like, oh, you moved back, and I'll be like,
Yeah.
yeah, we just moved back. But 2012 is becoming quite a
And
quite
isn't
a
that
distant
funny?
memory. It's like 7
Yes.
years.
Yes.
So I can't really say that anymore.
No, well, no, you can, because having moved around myself,
Yeah.
you're not actually like back until like 20 years.
Is that right?
Yeah, so you've
Okay,
got
okay.
13 full years-ish.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
That's good to
before
know.
like everyone will be like, oh yeah, they've been here a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're still new for a good 10 years.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because there's certain expectations that come
Yes.
along with not being new anymore,
Exactly.
right?
You have to volunteer on X amount of
This
boards,
is it.
and you have
This is
to.
it.
Yeah. So if you're not sharing something in your community in the next 15 years, you're in trouble. I think.
I'm sharing something though.
Oh,
I'm doing
see,
volunteer
you're
stuff.
already
I
you're
know,
already there.
I'm in it. I'm in it.
You're done.
I am neck deep
It's
in it.
fine. You're
Yeah.
fine. So maybe for you the timeline will be slightly shorter because you're already taking on the local responsibility.
There we
so
go.
It's totally fine. Now, okay, so one of the things I find fascinating, and actually we just finally got to meet in person
Yes.
at this event, but I've read a lot of your stuff. So this is switching gears a little from your day job of Director of Communications and, of course, your second day job, which is farmer. But you also have written for a couple different publications, really shedding some light on some major issues in agriculture. So tell me how that started, how you got into that.
Well, my background is in journalism. I was a journalist before I was a farmer. So when my wife and I lived in Toronto, I worked at the National Post in the newsroom there. And then when I had the eureka moment and decided to move to the farm, that was all great. I remember pitching the idea to you. Was it to you?
I don't think it was to me. Oh, maybe you sent me an email once.
Because you worked at Grain News?
Yeah, it might have been.
I pitched somebody the idea of
what year that
starting
was.
it would have been 2012, starting a column.
Oh, I left. I went on mat leave. That's why.
But did you get my initial pitch?
I don't think so. Okay, anyway, we'll figure that
yeah,
all out. Anyway,
yeah. So
Yeah.
2012, I pitched Grain News a column
Yeah.
about me being a farm boy, but a relative city slicker because I hadn't been on a farm since I was 18.
Yeah.
Learning the ropes for the first time in
Right.
my then early 30s.
Yeah.
And they loved the idea, and so I started writing for them right away. And then I started writing for other publications in the meantime, or since then, Maclean's and a few others.
Yeah.
And then I also pitched the Post, the Financial Post or National Post, and then they loved the idea too. They didn't have any ag content, and they wanted to get into that sector. So that worked out really, really well. And so since I think 3 years ago, I've been writing for the Post every 2 weeks.
Okay, is it every 2 weeks?
It's every 2
yeah.
weeks.
So
yeah.
and so this is one of the things from the background of from the media side myself, but also as a farmer.
Totally.
And in that realm of this giant divide, right, between people removed from the farm and everybody eats, but there's all this misunderstanding, and then trying to relate. There have been many conversations about how do you get more farming content into mainstream media, and perhaps it's revolutionary just to ask them if you can send something, right? But I think there have been many people who have thought, like, well, how do we? Well, maybe we just ask. Now, at the same time, you have to clearly have a message, have something to say, have some topics to talk about, some issues. Personal experience definitely carries a lot of weight when you can make something relatable, right? For sure. You have to have some writing talent, I suppose.
Sure.
Maybe. Or a good editor, right? So, but what I have found wonderful and refreshing to read your stuff is, and I appreciate that within, of course, the social media community, that people pick things up and it gets those conversations going. But I think also a lot of us within the industry feel kind of vindicated. Like, look, somebody knows we exist and put us in the paper. And I say the paper, even though it's online. But
I know.
And so do you get random emails from people saying, thanks for talking about this, or you're way off base, or?
I do.
Yeah.
Both, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember once Jamie, my wife, and I were on Victoria Island. We were hiking, and somebody called me to talk about a column I wrote on glyphosate. And
that's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yes.
It's a big one. But he found my phone number, so this person had done.
So clearly did some work.
Did some
footwork.
Sleuthing.
Yeah.
So I took the call, and it was actually an interesting call. It was a rant for sure, and I didn't. It wasn't mean. but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be out there writing for a national newspaper, I should be able to take a call like this once in a while.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's within his right to
Yes.
call me.
Yep.
And so that was a negative one. Although he was very kind, he would escalate and then he would catch himself and say, "You know what? I'm sorry, Toban. I don't take this personally. Don't take this
Yeah.
personally."
Okay.
And
So
then he'd re-escalate.
good. But I had at least some
Yeah.
sort of self-awareness to
Yes.
recognize that you have to be able to separate an individual from a topic,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
which is good. But it's also one of those things that within the industry, and many of us who deal with the public or are in media or maybe write some of these things or those sorts of things, it's very difficult sometimes to want to have that to put that information out there and not you need to be able to put the context around it, and that is where a longer written form or maybe a podcast or something like that, you can expand on that. I think one of the things that we in the industry often struggle with is if it's just a tweet or if it's just a whatever, then it just becomes this bickering back and forth, and it's not a real dialogue, it's not a real conversation. But being able to write and then being open to that conversation adds a bit of that context, I think, which is really cool. So do you get to choose your topics?
I do.
Have you ever had any completely no, we're not going to take that?
I actually don't think so.
That's good.
Not at the Post.
Yeah.
I know at Maclean's they once asked me to write about a certain topic, and that I haven't done a lot of that, but it was when the new NAFTA came.
Right. Okay.
All that buzz, and so I wrote a piece on that. But no, for the most part, I know that at the Post, when the column started, they wanted me to submit my ideas long in advance, and they'd vet them. But now they know that it's going to be fine, so they let me kind of.
It also is, it's, planning, I guess, and that's just it. It's a trust thing. It's a relationship thing, right? They have to know that you're going to come forward with things they want to print and feel they're going to get the mileage out of. But, at the same time, we don't always know what the issues of the day is going to be 6 months ahead of time, right?
That's right.
At all. And I don't know about you, but I know in writing editorials or writing, some of these, sometimes you've got to be in the right frame of mind to do it. And so to have it on a schedule and say, now you must write about glyphosate, there are some days I really don't want to do it.
Oh, Lyndsey. Totally.
I don't want to bite that one off today. I just don't want to. But, that's part of the job. So, but do you enjoy it? Do you find that it's how does that fit into your farming, into your day job? How do you fit it in there?
Oh, it's great. It's great. The kinds of discussions I have at work kind of mold my columns too, right? You have thoughtful people in the office who like to kind of tackle some of these ag issues philosophically, and they know that I write about them, so we'll have more in-depth discussions about these kinds of things, and often yields great columns that I can take partial credit for, but they're often just kind of consensus columns from a network of strong ag-related people, and I value that. I think about sometimes what it would look like if I would do more writing and less on any other slice of pie, and I don't know, I get scared because they all kind of work so well together right now that one would suffer then.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, within the RealAgriculture family, we sort of feel that way too, because many of us also farm or our parents do, and we still go back and spend time there. And to us, as much as that sometimes takes time away from the media company per se, it keeps us grounded and it keeps us in the loop, and it keeps us very much on the everyday of what are those challenges, what are the things we need to be chasing, what are those topics that are too important to just sort of let slide. And so exactly that, they all sort of work together, and so you don't ever want to give up one entirely.
Totally.
Although sometimes I know I do this too, there's always that pull of all the different beasts you have to feed, right? That it's a lot of coffee. That's what I do. There's a lot of coffee in my day, but that's just me. So now I will say, when you do write, a lot of it is issues-based. A lot of it is about sort of this beginning farmer, which again, we can say that for like a solid 10 years or more yet.
Great. Excellent.
So you'll have lots of fodder for a lot of time. But what do you think is one of the biggest challenges for farmers starting out?
That's tough. It's costs, really. It's kind of robust succession plans with whoever you're taking over from, and high costs, and kind of I want to say prohibitive policies, but how much of this, how much of what we deal with, every generation deals with, is kind of a historic norm, right? Like I'm sure there were challenges in my father's time and my grandfather's time too that were just as challenging, just looked a little different than ours today. But yeah, I think those are some of the biggest ones.
Yeah, I think, and I would agree, likely. And I guess we just get creative, right? That whatever the challenges are, then we just, as long as you can find people who are willing to be creative,
Yes.
alongside and with you, then that's what you do.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to have to, because gosh darn it, it's expensive to try.
And that's the thing. So I sit here and I tell you this, but I mean, I'm still in the throes of a succession plan. So,
Yeah.
I can't say that I've come across the threshold yet, right? I'm still,
Well, and it's a process. It's not an event.
Yeah,
right?
And I wonder then too, is it a process throughout? Like, will it always feel like a process?
Possibly.
I don't want to get too philosophical about these things, but maybe it is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you never feel like you're just like you're through it now.
Yeah.
And
unless you quite literally sort of, are someone who starts with a garden market CSA or whatever, and literally starts as their own.
Yes.
Maybe it's always a process.
Yeah.
It could very well be.
Yeah, and there's little wins along the way, right?
Yeah.
Jamie and I bought our first section of land. That's a win, and then there's more kind of on the horizon. These are good benchmarks.
Yes.
and things to learn from. But it's as it's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but I mean that's pretty to buy your first. That's pretty. Your first piece of land that's yours is pretty momentous. That's a big deal.
It was.
Right?
It was a big deal when I could rent my first piece.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, because suddenly I'm buying inputs and everything, or we are buying inputs, and now to own a few acres is it's
pretty cool. And that certain piece of land is the best piece of land, right?
Totally,
in the whole
absolutely.
Yeah, of course. All right, Toban. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lyndsey.